Either you're my girl or you're not. You make the choice. And you know what? She made a good choice. Paid off for me. You know what I'm trying to say? You don't say, you're going to love me. You've got to love me. You're married to me. No, give me a break. I've discovered that if you love somebody with all of your heart, well, that's the one thing that makes them love you even more back. When you love them. When you really love them. With no strings attached. I just love you. It works that way. And Jesus said the essence of love is sacrifice. He demonstrated it. God demonstrated His love towards us in that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. God so loved the world that He gave His only begotten Son, that whosoever believes in Him should not perish, but have everlasting life. That's the God kind of love. Greater love has no man than this, than that a man laid down his life for his friends, and you are my friends. So this is the new commandment. It's not just that I love my neighbor as myself. It's that I have an essence of sacrifice, a willingness to lay myself down. And that's what Jesus is speaking about. Because self-preservation is the strongest inclination of any human being. And yet Jesus is saying, but I laid down my life for you. It's interesting, in the Bible, when John's writing, the simplest revelation of God that you find in Scripture is the fact that God is love, because in John's writings, he actually gives to us what are called 3 definitive statements about God. In John 4:24, he says, God is spirit. In 1 John chapter 1, verse 5, he says, God is light. And in 1 John chapter 4, verse 8, he says, God is love. And so that is a definition of what God is. He is love. And for a Christian to be identified with God is to be known as those who love God. Because God's love is the chief characteristic that identifies me as a follower of God. In 1 John 4:16, we have known and believed the love that God has to us. God is love. And he who dwells in love dwells in God, and God in him. God's love is manifested in us, and it identifies us as being His children. It is the mark of the believer. I have my 4 babies, and I can tell you I understand them, and I do. You know why? Because they're like their dad. It's the truth. Every parent knows that. You see some trait in that kid, and you go, oh no, that's me. I do that. I did that. They are like that. They inherit things from us that are part. It's us. It's what we gave to them. And I see that my little David. David, when he's growing up, I see me in him, and I say, "Oh, I better hold on. I know what he's going to be like. He's like his dad." I have my Joseph, who is very much like me. His personality, in many ways, is very much like me. Corinne is very much. She's the female version of David Rosales. She is just like me. We butted heads throughout for years, because she was just like me. She knows everything there is to know. She's hard-headed. Well, that's from Mama. But other than that, I mean, and you know what I'm talking about. It is there. This identifying trait. That kid is a Rosales. There's no doubt about it. And even in our family, that's how we talk. Maria will say, "That's a Rosales." He's like, "No. That's my Rosales. That's my baby. She's just like me." Well, guess what? We have our Father's distinguishing characteristics too. God is love. And that's what we ought to live. Lives of love. I really believe that, because that's what Christians are. We're loving. There's a historian. His name is Philip Schaff. And he wrote concerning the history of Christianity. And this is what Philip Schaff said. He said, "Christianity is primarily not merely doctrine, but life. A new moral creation, a saving fact, first personally embodied in Jesus Christ, the incarnate Word, the God-man, to spread from Him and embrace gradually the whole body of the race and bring it into saving fellowship with God. In the individual believer, it begins not with religious views simply. It comes as a new life, as a creative fact and experience, taking up the whole man with all his faculties and capacities, releasing him from the guilt and the power of sin, reconciling him with God, restoring harmony and peace to the soul, and at last glorifying the body itself. It is not merely doctrine, it is life. And that one characteristic of that life is the love of God. So Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you. How have you loved me? Sacrificially. Let's illustrate it in this way. You see, because we are helpless to save ourselves, God has done something on our behalf. He demonstrated His love toward us, and that while we were sinners, Christ died for us. So you're on death row. And you begin to receive visitors, and they're religious visitors. And so the first person to come and speak to you and wants to talk to you is Buddha. The jailer brings Buddha to the cell, and he comes and he sits next to you. And as you're speaking to him, Buddha begins to give to you his wisdom. And so this is what he says. He says, you must remember one thing. All is misery. And therefore, work for your own salvation. Isn't that a nice thing to hear? But that's the essence of Buddhism. So you say, well, thanks a lot. And he leaves. They bring in Muhammad. And he sits next to you and he says to you, you must come to realize that this is simply the will of Allah. That's basically the essence of Islam, submission. It's all the will of Allah. And you just see him walking out and you're going, well, so far all is misery and it's the will of Allah. And here comes Krishna. And Krishna obviously teaches reincarnation. He sits down and he looks at you and he says, well, better luck next time. I don't think that works either for me. Well, the jailer comes again with a fourth person. He opens the door and Jesus steps in. And the jailer announces to you, listen, Jesus just paid the price for your freedom, and He's come to take your place. Because that's what Romans 5:6-8 says. At just the right time, when we were still powerless, Christ died for the ungodly. Very rarely will anyone die for a righteous man, though for a good man someone might possibly dare to die. But God demonstrated His love for us in this, that while we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. Now you tell me where the hope is. Is it in Buddha? Is it in Muhammad? Is it in Krishna? Or is it in the words of that jailer who says, He paid your price, He's taking your place? That's Christianity. And God demonstrated that to us in the giving of His Son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross for us. And that's why Jesus said, love one another as I have loved you. That is the heart of God. He is the good shepherd who lays down His life for the sheep. And so we see the love of God demonstrated through sacrifice. And that's why He said, by this shall all men know that you are my disciples, if you have love one for another. Well, as this is taking place, verse 36, Simon Peter said to Him, Lord, where are you going? Jesus answered him, where I am going you cannot follow me now, but you shall follow me afterward. Peter said to him, Lord, why can I not follow you now? I'll lay down my life for your sake. Jesus answered him, will you lay down your life for my sake? Most assuredly I say to you, the rooster shall not crow till you have denied me 3 times. Why can't I follow you now? We're not like the unbelievers. We're not like those whom you referred to earlier. We haven't forsaken you. We're remaining fast with you. I will remain with you to the end. I will die for you. How can you possibly believe that I wouldn't do that? Will you really? Peter, you don't seem to understand. You may have a love for me, but you don't have my kind of love yet. You may think that you would die for me, but you won't. No, it brings me to my conclusion. 3 things I want to remind you of that we all need in all of this. Peter's saying, I'll die for you. Jesus says, no, you won't. You'll deny me.